Yeah, hello everyone. I'll be the moderator. My name is Saki for this next session, which is the first Pacific session, and it's afternoon here in Seoul. I'm actually in Seoul, so in Papua New Guinea we say afternoon. So also some parts of the world you may be waking up, so we say morning or Olgata, and say Bula as well, and Talofa and good evening as well, if it's an evening in your country. So welcome to this session on green finance pathways to scale up transforming of the finance sector in the Pacific and PNG towards green growth. But before we move on to the session and with the speakers, we'll just listen to welcoming remarks from our President, His Excellency, Mr. Ban Ki-moon.
Our one and only planet is facing a crisis of unprecedented proportions. The theme for this year, fast-tracking transformative climate action, underscores the grave and urgent situation. For many years, I have been emphasizing a simple truth about the climate crisis. There is no plan B, because there is no planet B either. The opportunity to save the planet is not for the distant future. Now is the time. We need everyone to join and help tackle the climate crisis, and the policies and solutions need to meet the urgency and severity with boldness and innovativeness. The year 2023 was marked yet again with record-breaking temperatures and severe weather events. To keep global temperatures below the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold and avert the worst, we must act swiftly and boldly. Therefore, I'm proud that Global Green Growth Week brings together policymakers, thought leaders, investors, and innovators from the public and private sectors from all over the globe to discuss solutions to the climate crisis. And I'm also excited that there will be a special spotlight on young people and their pivotal role in a greener future. Much like the least developed countries and small island developing states, young people will be the most impacted, despite having contributed to the problems the least. They therefore have every right to contribute to the solutions, and their creativity and passion will be invaluable assets. With the conclusion of the first global stocktake, discussions to operationalize loss and damage and other important issues, this year's COP28, which is just weeks away, will be critically important, and I hope the Global Green Growth Week will prove to be a helpful stepping stone to build momentum, hone ideas, and much more. The challenges before us are immense, but so is our collective potential. Let us seize this moment and work together to fast-track transformative climate action. Together, we can secure a safer, greener, and more sustainable world for ourselves and for generations to come. I wish you my best wishes for very productive discussions. Thank you.
Well, they've got the very clear message from His Excellency Ban Ki-moon. What he's telling us this afternoon is that there's no plan B. We need to accelerate climate action and we need to work together. Think in the Pacific, in this example, we actually taking our cue from Mr. Ban Ki-moon. And in Papua New Guinea, we've initiated some very important transformative work in greening the finance sector in PNG. We know that climate action requires a lot of funds and resources to back it up. And if you look at economies all around the world, including Papua New Guinea, most of the resources are actually in the hands of the private sector. So the idea here is that having all stakeholders working together and to incentivize, motivate the private sector to invest more in activities that are green, that support climate mitigation and adaptation. So I would like to start the session by extending a very warm welcome to all our friends and partners who are calling in and listening in from around the world. And I'd like to also acknowledge our colleagues in GGGI who are with us here today as well. This session will feature pioneering speakers on green finance from the Pacific and PNG, in particular senior executives from Papua New Guinea Central Bank and financial sector as well. This session is actually intended to stimulate discussions on new, innovative, and fast transformative pathways of green finance in the Pacific to inspire global audience with transformational benefits for the private sector, for the finance sector, and what this means for climate resilient development, sustainable economies, and safer and secure future in the region. We have actually been fortunate to be able to line up a lineup of very good speakers who have actually had a part in supporting GGGI in the work it's doing in collaboration with the Bank of Papua New Guinea, which is a central bank of Papua New Guinea. And also we acknowledge the funding that we have received from New Zealand MFAT to enable this project to progress to where it is today. Very quickly, let me just list for you the speakers that we have today. We have Aaron Levin calling in from Sydney. We have Johan Newman, who's calling in from Malaysia, who's with the Alliance for Financial Inclusion. Aaron, for example, he's part of the International Finance Corporation based out of Sydney. And there's Mr. George Awap, who's a major player in this work we're doing in Papua New Guinea. He's the assistant governor for the Bank of Papua New Guinea. And Deborah Sungi, who is a senior executive with the Climate Change Development Authority, where GGGI is embedded in. And of course, we have Tony as well, Tony Westaway from a bank based out of Papua New Guinea, and also Vani Mendes, who's a very well, Vani Mendes, who's a very well-known person in Papua New Guinea, working particularly in supporting the development of micro, small, medium enterprises. So with me today, I'm the moderator, and the moderating team that I have to support me include Penny and Angus from GGI in Papua New Guinea, and also Jisoo, who's a technical advisor on this project, who's based out of here in headquarters. Let me just quickly remind us that we just have 1 hour for this session, so we will have our speakers. They've been allocated time to speak, and I'll try and manage that so that we keep within the time. And then for those that are listening in who may have questions at the end, you can actually write your question online. And I think we have provision for 3 questions. One will be from the audience that are here, and then also 2 questions will be from those who are participating from online. So the objective of this session is really to help us understand the inclusive green finance landscape globally and at home, and in this case in the Pacific, and appreciating what is on the ground in the finance sector to fast-track transformative climate action. The speakers altogether will be speaking for 30 minutes, and then there'll be 10 minutes of questions from the virtual and present audience. And at the end, we'll wrap up with 1 minute each from our panel for the take-home messages, and I'll wrap it up as a moderator. So first up for us will be Ms. Deborah Sungi. Deborah Sungi is a very senior executive at the Climate Change Development Authority in Papua New Guinea. And she works very closely with us. She's our friend as well. And we appreciate all the support that she's given GGDI all these years. So, Deborah, from where you're sitting in CCDA and your understanding of the challenges of addressing climate change and accessing climate finance at the international and also local level, for you, why should the Pacific and PNG be looking to transform its sectors to address climate change and why the need to fast track it? Deborah, the floor is yours. Thank you.
So at the government level, we very much focal and in terms of ensuring that our coordination role in mobilizing resources ensure that we drive climate change adaptation and mitigation actions within the country to a speed that we all have a target that we have outlined in our NDCs. And by 2030, we have to ensure that we at least reach our target that we have set out in the NDC. Hence, it is very important for us to coordinate together with the stakeholders from private sectors, development partners, right at the national level and down to the local level government, including the provincial level government. So identifying those challenges is the key and the most important work that the government needs to do. And that is what we have done. Through our NDCs, we've laid out the targets, but also at the same time identifying those challenges that we have outlined and we have put forward together with our partners to address them. And such challenges include, and it is always a priority when we sit in the negotiations under climate finance, is the access of financing to Papua New Guinea, and not only Papua New Guinea, but the small island developing states. That is always a challenge. We lack infrastructure. We still have the challenge of institutional arrangements, governance in place to ensure that we access those finance that is out there and that can be mobilized within the country. So that's one of the things that we face in terms of climate finance access to the country. The other challenge that we also face is the risk of climate change that we obviously see around the region and including Papua New Guinea. As we in the country, it kind of put the risk of green financing infrastructures, green financing projects and programs within the country. So this is one of the other challenges that we also face with the frequency of natural disasters occurring, including the climate hazards that we face around the country and its impact. So those type of challenges are being identified, and we have outlined them through our national plans and national priorities framework. And with the NDC, this is the agency that we see that we have to quickly work together, coordinate with our stakeholders, and implement the climate change adaptation and mitigation priorities within the country. So that's basically the agency of ensuring that we work together, not only with the traditional kind of arrangement that we work with bilateral, multilateral partners, but now being inclusive and getting private sector involved through the discussions.
Well, thank you very much, Deborah. Deborah reminds us again of the challenges that we face in Papua New Guinea, and we're all very clear in Papua New Guinea. They have always been mapped out really very clearly in the announced NDC for the country and also the National Adaptation Plan. So it's all about working together. So she set the scene for us. And so now we'll move on to the next part of the session. We've divided it into two parts. And the first part will be the next three speakers will be focusing on the supply side of green finance, and then the remaining speakers will ask them to focus on the demand side of green finance. So in discussing the supply side, the next speaker will be Johan, and Johan, we understand from your work in Malaysia, you are the head of the Inclusive Green Finance for Alliance for Financial Inclusion. So definitely you have in-depth knowledge and technical expertise and experience in this field. So given that, my question to you is that is the new concept of inclusive green finance slowing down transformative climate action in the Pacific and PNG, or why should we prioritize it?
Yes, thank you very much. And first of all, thank you so much for having me here today. It's a true honor to be a part of this panel conversation. So inclusive green finance, as you know, it's indeed quite new. It's a part of the bigger green finance landscape, and it's all about how access to financial services and financial products can be a way to build resilience and enable climate mitigation amongst households, MSMEs, amongst individuals. We all know that a lot of the green finance conversations in the last years have been focusing on large-scale mitigation, a lot about climate risk disclosures and stress testing, but inclusive green finance is all about how financial regulators and central banks can take action to enable climate mitigation and resilience building amongst the vulnerable populations through access to financial services. To be a little bit more concrete, having access to formal savings when there's a natural disaster can be absolutely life-saving. Having access to credit for greening your own practices, but also to build your own resilience against climate impacts can be truly transformative. Having access to climate risk insurance, it speaks for itself, but also increasingly we see the importance of having access to adequate payment systems, both around climate disasters, but also generally just for SMEs, for example, to grow their businesses by climate change, but also to build resilience as an individual or own household. So what we're working with in the Alliance for Financial Inclusion, which is a network of 85 central banks and financial regulators globally, is to develop policy interventions and initiatives on inclusive green finance. And we're really happy to see the Bank of Papua New Guinea embarking on this journey now several years ago, and the recent inclusive green finance policy being adopted earlier this year. And now, of course, it's a question of the implementation. How can we work together to really ensure that the vulnerable populations, individuals, households, and SMEs in Papua New Guinea can have access to green credit, to insurance, to formal savings, but also to adequate payment systems. And we really see a big interest in inclusive green finance, especially from developing emerging economies and small island developing states, where obviously the brunt of climate change is all about climate resilience rather than the large-scale mitigation plans. So that's just a start on what inclusive green finance is. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Johan. Thank you for sharing with us your perspective on how to actually strengthen green finance and so as to incentivize the flow of capital to support the building of community resilience in the countries that we work in, like Papua New Guinea. Thank you very much. The next speaker will be Aaron Levin. And Aaron, given your position as a Senior Operations Officer and Sustainable Finance Expert in Asia and Pacific Advisory for International Finance Corporation, we are really interested in your views on this as well. And given your understanding of the green taxonomy and the application challenges in the Pacific, a very important component of green finance and something that we are implementing in PNG. My question to you is the sustainability reporting and green taxonomies the rabbit or the turtle in the race to transform climate action? Aaron, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that's a very pertinent question. I think it has the potential to be a rabbit, and we certainly we want it to be a rabbit that that operates at a sensible pace, because we know that the needs are over $2 trillion a year by 2030 to kickstart the new climate economy, to protect emerging economy populations. We know from IFC's perspective, we need to work with urgency. We need to work with scale. Over the last financial year, IFC committed over $14 billion in climate finance. 46% of that was our own money. So you asked about supply, but we also we mobilized private capital, and we increased that by over 100%. So urgency and scale implies rabbit. but we need to do it with the care of a turtle. So how do you develop the standards appropriately? I want to just touch on a couple of points. So IFC really has a few different roles. So it is a supplier of finance, but it also works a lot on creating a pipeline of investment projects, bringing the risk down in these investment projects, and then mobilizing the private capital at scale. And we're often the first to come into a country where the climate agenda hasn't really taken root. And we see, multiple challenges when we come into a country that can hold back supply. They can be policy and regulations that aren't supportive, like fossil fuel subsidies or restrictive energy policies, or they can be broader macro challenges like volatile currencies or limited liquidity or underdeveloped financial infrastructure. And all of these can affect how available capital is and how expensive that capital is. So we and its entities like GGGI put a lot of analytical work into getting over the subsidies and restrictive policies challenges. But we also know that green taxonomies, promoting good climate and environmental information disclosures, and a good strategy around it are really core foundations to this greening of a financial sector. We also know that you've got to develop capital markets, and we've been happy to support Fiji and Papua New Guinea for quite some time, removing those macro bottlenecks. And we also know that you need innovative instruments like green bonds and green loans and blended finance. And then behind that, again, you need the right kinds of tax incentives, the right kinds of grants or subsidies, the right kinds of technical assistance to get the risk levels down and to promote the right kinds of investments. So I want to quickly touch on two themes. So my time in the Pacific, I'm a firm believer that the Pacific has a strong ability to innovate. And the second thing I want to quickly touch on is the role of MSMEs. And I'm among some very serious experts around me who know much more about MSMEs than I do. So first of all, in innovation, we know that the Pacific can innovate. We saw Fiji issue the first sovereign green bond and create a market for emerging economies in sovereign green bonds. They were heavily oversubscribed. They listed on the London Stock Exchange, and we're encouraged to see that they might also proceed with a blue bond issuance. We're also seeing pension funds adopting ESG policies. They see the risks and the opportunities. And we're really excited to also work with Fiji on their next sustainable finance journey, similar to what GGGI is doing in Papua New Guinea. We're going to help them develop a green finance taxonomy and support their ESG risk management systems. MSMEs. So we all know they're the backbone of economies like Papua New Guinea and the Pacific. So how can they enter the sustainable finance space? How can they align financial strategies with green principles? And we also know that MSMEs are really important in global supply chains, and they're really important in decarbonizing industry. But we also know they don't spend their time day to day thinking about climate change. They're not thinking about decarbonization. They're just doing their work, unless they can see there's an opportunity for them in sustainable finance, or if they can see that there are risks coming their way. And so I just want to reference that IFC's put out a reference guide, the Sustainable MSME Finance Reference Guide, and it's like a compass for financial institutions who are looking to fund MSMEs but don't really know how to get them to start thinking about how to grow, how their own business can be more sustainable. And so we provide training alongside this guide to help them think about how can a FI create a roadmap, how can they develop a pipeline, how can they start monitoring the use of proceeds, and through that, entities like IFC can then fund the financial institutions as these pipelines build. And this ties in with the taxonomy work really well, because a taxonomy lists out, it's like a shopping list of what can qualify as green or sustainable, and that can help guide financial institutions. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Aaron. We appreciate what you've shared with us about the importance of the taxonomy in greening of financial sector, de-risking, and also acknowledge the good work and important work that IFC is doing in mobilizing billions of dollars in climate finance to help countries around the world, including the Pacific. Thank you very much. Our third speaker on the supply discussion is George Awap. George is no stranger to us in PNG. I would say that the success of the Inclusive Green Finance project that we are implementing in PNG, that GGGI is implementing in PNG in collaboration with the Bank of Papua New Guinea, is largely to do with the energy and the leadership provided by people like George and Azalia and others as well. So George, in Papua New Guinea, immediately introduction, but I think I've said enough in terms of the important role that you've played together with support from the acting governor of the Reserve Bank of Papua New Guinea, the Bank of Papua New Guinea, sorry. She was supposed to have been here, but fortunately they had to call off their trip. We're happy that George is with us. So George, given your role in leading work that we've done so far in greening the financial sector in Papua New Guinea and the pathway that we've mapped out going forward in terms of the IGFP roadmap. My question to you is that with the Central Bank of Papua New Guinea pioneering IGF or Inclusive Green Finance in the Pacific, what have been the hard lessons there, and what is one key aspect that needs changing for IGFP, for Inclusive Green Finance to be effective? George, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Saki. I apologize on behalf of the government that this couldn't be here because there's some other commitment that are much more immediate. In respect of the way it gets conducted itself in terms of promoting in the region, we realize that the central banks do have a big role to play. Look at PNG itself. It's an island economy. We're sitting on two plates that are always placing against each other, and we always have a lot of earthquakes and seismic activities and all that. And in addition to that, we have a lot of climate changes like El Nino factor. We've been suffering from long drought seasons, and our people do not have the infrastructure to sustain themselves. Deforestation has been taking place at a very rapid pace, including fishing too. In some areas, people are complaining of fishing issues, and some, like if you go to the north coast, there fishermen are complaining about lack of fish now. PNG is very good marine resources, we know that, but if we do not have control over the depletion of those resources, we are going to get into a much bigger problem, because 80% of Papua New Guinea's population is unbanked. They live in rural areas, isolated, and infrastructure-wise, there's a lot of issues with these people. In terms of our journey, the central bank recognizes that we need to have a set of policies, and we've developed a policy in terms of green finance. We recognize the government's effort in doing climate change issues, but they are much broader issues. In respect of green finance, we recognize that we need to be in that space. Development of the policy has been an easy ride. We started in Lesotho in 2001. By the end of 2002, we finished that report, and we launched it in 2003. That's easy, but real challenges come when it comes to implementation. But to implement something that's far more complicated, what are the pillars that we need to look to? There must be some concrete pillars that must drive this. One of them is financial education. Every time we introduce something into the area, everybody's taken aback. They don't know what green finance is. Nobody understands it. No ordinary public, not even professionals in different offices or fields have any good understanding of what green finance is. So financial education has to be taught at different levels, at the executive levels, at the board level, and from the user side and from supplier side as well. The financial institutions also have some understanding, but they're not fully clear what we're talking about when green finance and how they're going to finance it, how we will finance it, what will be the effects on the books, what is the profit bottom line, where's the privately driven institutions. So financial education is critical to running the having a successful green finance program in PhD. The other area that we can think about is finance. Financial institutions are commercial institutions, they're profit oriented, and they're also over-regulated institutions too. So they don't know, they cannot go below certain level because they have to meet with the regulators' demands. At the same time, they have to meet the shareholders' requirements. So they're facing a conflict in a lot of ways. So when we're talking about financial institutions to provide finance for the green finance, where would they come from? Will it be a sort of community service obligation? No, it's got to be profit driven. They will do community service obligation, but to a limited extent, and that I know that there's from a regulatory perspective. So how does now it begs the question is, what is the role of the government? What is the role of international donors in this space? We have to create a field in which all of us will have to work together. It's a private-public partnership or donor partnership. That is what we need when we want to create a package for the financial institutions to take from us. It's not that we're just going to throw it at the financial institutions. We have to have a package that will attract the financial institutions to come on board this game. The other area is regulation. The central bank is a regulator and it will impose standards on the financial institutions. It will not walk away from the standards. One of the things I always notice that financial institutions do not want to lend to the agricultural sector. And there is a reason to that. Because by banking regulation, any loan that is not repaid within 3 months is in arrears already. It has to be taken off the books after 6 months. Agricultural products take a longer gestation period. So commercial banks will already not lend to the agriculture sector by the rules of the game itself. How do we manage that? So this is something both the donors, the governments, and whoever wants to, all of us who want to take part in this exercise must understand the difficulty the financial institutions will go through in trying to adapt to the regulations or environment or space we're trying to create. And this is fundamental because financial institutions will not come into this space if we do not create that space. And the regulator will not allow the books to go bad. You know, if it goes to the non-performing loan or portfolio, the risk is increasing much faster. Central bank is going to come down on the central financial institutions very hard. And then it will have consequences on green finance. And that we want to avoid. And this is, I think, something that we need to be very, very mindful of. I think in some of the projects that we're doing in terms of creating a green finance supply chain is very important. I heard Aaron Levin mention something about work with private entrepreneurs in this kind of things. Creating a supply chain will be very, very important. If you're trying to do entrepreneurial skills improvement, then we must think about linking to a financial institution as to how they can take part. But entrepreneurial capacity building must be accompanied with a set of finance availability. It cannot go by itself. One of the things I think we've done some headways, we've made some headways into this is the signing of the letter of intent with the French Agency for Development and the Bank of America at the time. President Macron was here and our Prime Minister James Barrow was there, and we signed a letter of intent with the French. That is a very critical piece of instrument we've signed. Because that is meant to create a refinancing facility. In time, we need to test all the products that we're going to offer to the private sector. The kind of product that will, some of the products can be commercially financed. For instance, if I want to build a solar panel, of course I can pay for that. So if I want to get the loan, I'll get it paid off my salary, not a problem. But if I want to go into reforesting an area, there will be no immediate return. A return will be 20, 30 years down the line. It's not material to the person that is. So on the books of the commercial banks, it will never be on. So how do we address that? If we find a solution to this problem, then the other problems will be solved. But if we cannot solve, a person who wants to reforest the land cannot provide finance to that person, then this thing won't work. Simple as that. So for all partners, we need to find out how are we going to manage a guy who's going to reforest an area or plant mangroves and say that I'm planting mangroves because I'm thinking about protecting the ecosystem. I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. Listening to you, what's always coming out of you is the words of a very wise man. Thank you very much, George. Again, we're reminded of all the policy work that's gone into all of the work that has been led by the Bank of Papua New Guinea, PNG. George is saying that, to develop a robust, effective green finance sector in any country, like in the PNG experience, it's all hooked up on a couple of pillars. And that includes making sure that, relevant products are available for the supply of green finance, and which also matches the demand on the ground. Education for stakeholders on what green finance is, and also on finance literacy, which is a big issue in Papua New Guinea, and of also making sure that proper regulation is in place as well. Those are some of the key points that are coming out of what George has just shared with us. Thank you very much, George. Our last speaker on the discussion on the demand side is Vani. Vani is a good friend of ours at GGGI, big support of GGGI. She's a champion of MSME development in Papua New Guinea. And Vani, appreciating the lessons and the gains on the ground in the MSME sector in PNG, and of course your experience and leadership in it. My question to you is that MStrat, your company, has been developing green entrepreneurs in PNG and the Pacific. You also picked up International Innovative Awards this year with the work you are doing with the SME sector. What demand is there for the SME sector to access green finance? And what advice would you give to transform the finance sector of PNG? Lastly, what works for the men and women doing green business in PNG? I know there's a lot of questions, but as I know you very well, Vani, you'll be able to sail through this very smoothly. The floor is yours, Vani. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Saki, and thank you for having me on these discussions, conversations and dialogues around, SME sector and entrepreneurship around Papua New Guinea. I represent the voice of our unheard people in Papua New Guinea, and mostly, SMEs, startups, and aspiring entrepreneurs, out there. And I must say that, there's a whole heap of potential out there. We have lots of Papua New Guineans who are doing amazing things, but they're deprived and they're suppressed of support. And I applaud the work of, the policymakers, the regulators, the stakeholders that come around this table and have dialogues that represent, MSME. But I really see a big missing link. There's a huge gap. We got these policy level makers and we have the people who's representing us in the middle. And I want to applaud the work of GGGI, because we have been working together in partnership for the last it's going towards 4 years, I guess. And for me, running an entrepreneur hub, providing those entrepreneurial resources, mentoring sessions, coaching sessions, and capacity building around trying to educate our SMEs or business owners that say, if you register the business, what's next for you? And this is where I don't believe in reinventing the wheel. Yes, I have my programs, but if we bring partners and collaborative, strategic partners into the hub to provide them to support our entire SMEs across the region, that's already a win-win situation. And this is where the work of the partnership with GGGI and Amsterdam Space, we run the incubator program, which is, focusing around startups, because, when you register your business, what's next for you? And startups, they're just startups. They need to learn how to run their business. What is their vision? What is their main purpose? What is their goal? And what are they, solving? Of course, you run your business because you want to solve problems. As Papua New Guineans, we see challenges, we see problems. We look for solutions to address those concerns. But every time we go and we knock on doors, no one's there for us. And I'd like to say it here as well. Yes, there's policies, but how are we implementing? Who are we bringing on the table so that they implement what we are actually, setting our plans, our policies, the outcomes, these things. We need to have some measurements. We have launched so many policies, so many strategic plans, MTDS, MTDP, I'm not sure, but I'm sure that our government, stakeholders know what I'm talking about. See, where are the outcomes? How many Papua New Guineans we have really impacted? How many growing Papua New Guineans we have invested in them? See, when we provide capacity training, we need to vet them. Who are startups? There are startups that need training. Who's in the middle that needs really mentoring and coaching? And who are already organizations that are already investment ready? We need a hand up. We don't need handouts because we know how to solve our problems. We know how to run our business. We know what we are doing that is impacting. And I'm in the technology space. I provide internet connectivity and in the hub that provides a huge resource that SME needed to help themselves. I don't get help from anybody else, but I work in collaboration with partners that have the same vision to help our growing Papua New Guinea SMEs. And since we have run the partnerships with GGI, the success is we don't tell the stories. We expect our own people to be advocates of what we do. And the cohorts that have gone over the years, and when we apply these programs, there's about 200, 300. They're hungry for knowledge. They're hungry for information. It's not going down from the top down. So you need players. There's so many amazing Papua New Guineans around the region. We should already have the database. Bring them on. This is where you will see impact. This is where you will see that, yes, we're taking back PNG because we're doing it with people around us that come and provide the resources. Yes, we need to know, the governance side of things, which our government does, the policymakers, that has to be communicated down because there's no information that is sharing to the people. How are they going to be educated? See, I've worked, my business is 9 years. Next year, I'm going to be 10 years. But because we're passionate, we're determined, we want to help our people, we look for solutions, and we collaborate with people that come and provide, the community that we are creating. And I'm telling you that when you help an SME here, the SME also feeds the community. I'm talking from bottom up. And you've got to be with the people. And this is where we spend more time with the people. I've traveled high and low, rural, connected rural, communities with our internet services. And the challenges of running our program, not everybody is connected to internet. And we're resilient. We have done things without learning, but if we provide an extra effort to give them that access and platform and educate them, they take it and they run with it. And that's what we are seeing in our programs that we run with GGGI, the Climate Pad launch, and now our, entrepreneurs are representing, and they need to be exposed because development is not going into the villages. We're deprived. What are we going to do? I'm sorry, but I have to say from practical side of things so that it probes our thinking. And if a woman is doing something, and my dreams are there, my dreams are far better than myself. What we're creating around is that bringing the people in so that they provide that. And we need to bring this information and educate our people. Create an information hub where everyone across the country can reach out and have access. But if we don't have internet across the country and in the last miles, how are we going to digitize people? How are they going to be banked? And we make it hard for the people, especially opening bank accounts. SMEs, if we have to go and find try to get loans, we have a list of requirements to comply with. How are we going to help them? Because they know how to get it done. We just have to give them a hand up, or if they don't know the requirements, educate them, not to block the doors for them.
But could you please wrap up so that we will run out of
Thank
time
you.
because we would like to give time to speak. Thank you.
So my last question is that, if we work in collaboration, create more private dialogues, bring the right people on the table, I'm sure that our policies will be implemented from the bottom up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vani. Again, it's good to hear about the good work that's going on in PNG, also the changes that MSME development is facing. For our last speaker, it'll be Tony Rossaway. Tony is actually the CEO for my bank. Tony, you come with a lot of experience as well, appreciating the startup lessons and gains on the ground in the financial sector with respect to inclusive green finance. My question for you is, as a microfinance institution in PNG, how prepared is your bank's green finance portfolio to address some of the challenges and opportunities outlined by our previous panelists? Tony.
Yes, thanks very much, Saki, and thanks, Vani. A lot of what Vani said resonates with me, particularly about listening to MSMEs. But I'll come back round to that. And also the Assistant Governor, thank him for talking about the regulatory environment. I thank the Central Bank for creating an enabling environment for institutions, microfinance institutions such as ours, to operate. It's just the government mentioned the challenge for commercial banks and financial institutions, but my bank's very much a development bank. We're a microfinance institution, and therefore our target market segment is those people at the bottom of the economic pyramid. So we're talking about women and children, we're talking about rural dwellers, farmers, informal sector people, and the like. So these people are obviously also the most vulnerable sector in the community, the most vulnerable people in society. And what we're learning about the impact of climate change is that it has the greatest impact on the most vulnerable people. So therefore, to look after my target market segment and to ensure that my customers, my clients can continue to harvest the food gardens, to continue to get access to clean water, to obtain protection from natural disasters and severe weather events, that we need to play a role in ensuring that we can build some resilience. And speaking about weather events, we're seeing it here in Papua New Guinea now. I've already had customers impacted by floods in the Central Province, which means it's impacted on the availability of sago. It's meant that they've had to bring in vegetables from other provinces. So we're seeing that now. We're also seeing the introduction of the El Nino, and I'll come back and talk about that a little bit later. But an institution like my bank, we look to balance our commerciality with our social mission. And this Green Finance Centre that we have here in Papua New Guinea, in the collaboration with GGGI and the Central Bank and the Centre for Excellence in Financial Inclusion, are all important for us. Yes, we have challenges. I think to myself, particularly in the product development area, as Donald Rumsfeld can be quoted, talked about, we don't know what we don't know, or what are the unknown unknowns. And talking to my friends at GGGI, I recognise that different jurisdictions and different countries around the world tackle this differently. My thoughts are that my bank has a role in building resilience. I think we need to be able to tap into research a lot more As a microfinance institution, we also focus on agribusiness. The Assistant Governor would be pleased to hear. So I suspect, well, I know there'll be a need in Papua New Guinea to migrate away from some of the traditional crops, which have been harvested for centuries, to move into crops that are more adaptive to a warming planet. I think that it's incumbent on institutions like my bank to understand what those crops and what that migration will look like. So in order that when we're investing in credit finance, that we're investing in the right areas. I understand that there is work done, or research is available. I know CGAP are doing some work, particularly around agriculture for women. And I'm hoping that we can tap into that. And also Aaron mentioned a little earlier, the IFC's reference guide, and I'm sure that's going to be quite important. So we need an implementation roadmap, and that's what we're doing at the moment. And we've taken that journey. It's still very early days. One of the most important things we recognise is you can't manage what you can't measure. In other words, I think one of the first things we need to do as a microfinance institution is review the taxonomy that's been put in place with the great work by the technical working group here in Papua New Guinea, and have a looking at ways to facilitate the reporting of inclusive or sustainable finance, and all green loans and investments, ensuring that we don't have any greenwashing. I was also take on board what Joanne, and I hope I pronounced her name right, from Malaysia, when she spoke a bit earlier. And it really resonated with me that whilst we seem to have a very much a focus on the green finance and on the access to credit, it's not necessarily access to credit, it's the first hurdle. We, at my bank, very much work in the digital financial services space. And it was interesting to hear about the role that payment systems have in terms of this warming planet. And I'm reminded of the impact that digital financial services had in Haiti after the earthquake. I think that both the Gates Foundation and USAID at the time worked very hard to do a rapid deployment of mobile money in that jurisdiction. And that was very, very important. And likewise with the Ebola outbreak, and particularly in Sierra Leone, the impact of mobile money to pay the development agencies on the ground there dealing with the natural disaster. I think from a microfinance perspective, from a digital financial services perspective, I think we've got quite a bit that we could add value to in Papua New Guinea when it comes to mobile money. Only recently, only last week, my bank signed a memorandum of understanding with Save the Children organisation. And that is to facilitate social payments for people that are impacted, in particular with the El Nino. It's going to certainly people in Morobe province will understand the impact of the El Nino quite soon. So that's an area that we can work with in microfinance. But I think it's a starter, facilitating the reporting, promoting the development of inclusive and green financial products is probably that next step. But as I said, Saki, it's early days for us, but given our target market segment, just to summarise, we want to build resilience, we want to participate. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tony. As a practitioner, it's good to learn that, the work that you're doing, it's work in progress, trying to match supply and demand, and a lot of research needs to be done as well. We're coming to the end of our session, and we'd like to just allow for a few questions before we wrap up. Are there any questions online? I can't see any questions. No. Okay. What about from the floor? No. Okay. We've got about 4 minutes to finish this session. Maybe we'll just allow each of the speaker 30 seconds wrap up. What is a key point that you'd like our listeners as their main takeaway? So we'll just follow the sequence from our first speaker, and that will be Deborah. So please, just 30 seconds, very quickly, 1 point. What would be a good takeaway for today's session? Thank you very much. Deborah.
Thank you, Saki. So at the government level for us is, I guess we have been established, CCDA have been established 10 to 11 years now, and we have just amended our Climate Change Management Act. For us is we have, and we see that we have the institutional arrangements in place now. We have the policy frameworks, the legal framework that will enable us to work and implement, and we are ready to partner with our stakeholders, including our, partners from multilateral development and bilateral development partners, and also with our private sector. So public-private partnership is one key element or mechanism that we want to drive in terms of implementation. So that is the focus from us at the government level.
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. Johan, 1 point.
Yes,
One key point.
building on what was shared by Assistant Governor George and by Wani just now, really also focusing on the demand side and not only providing financial education, but also understanding what is the true demand, what are the needs, what are the kind of lacks in the system from the user side is essential. And there's really interesting research that's been done already in the Pacific and Fiji. And I think building on that, there's a lot that can be learned before designing the policies and implementing the frameworks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Aaron?
Yeah, just one small point. We all need to be using the same kind of language, that language that, respects science, understands the circumstances of countries like Papua New Guinea, that ensures that contributes to environmental objectives, that's transparent. And the good news is we're actually starting to speak the same language. We see the taxonomy in Papua New Guinea. We've got one coming up in Fiji. There's a harmonization. There's some disclosure standards. We're getting there. So I think finishing off with some good news there.
Thank you. I will leave George last. Tony?
Tony? Oh, sorry, it was very sorry. I think one of the key takeaways is the needs assessment, not only a needs assessment of the financial institution like ourselves on the supply side, but also to understand the needs of the MSMEs, which was highlighted by Vani, certainly on the demand side. Thanks, Saki.
Thank you. Vani, 1 key point, takeaway?
I guess listening to everybody else, I believe that, creating an ecosystem where information is easily accessible and support system provided there for us to disseminate information and educate, and we speak the one language, and I'm putting my Pacific, head on that, we work as one Pacific, one, unity and roll out the plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Vani. George, 1 last point.
Thank you. Well, I'll just mention a few words here. That's one is financial literacy. The other is financial infrastructure and finance being available to make it workable. And the other is effective regulation that's necessary to ensure the safety of the financial institutions in this game. Then you have data is very important. I think Tony's mentioned that data, and then gender issues are very critical in this space. FinTech can be used, as Tony's mentioned, and then we have to create linkages between the institutions, demand from the demand side to the financial institution. That linkage has to be created. Then I think product study is also very important. Again, not just introduce a product, that also presents a risk in financial institutions.
Okay, George, we'll have to wrap up, George. Thank you very much. Again, I would like, as moderator, I'd like to just thank everyone. Thank you for your participation. I think the message today is very clear. Greening the finance sector in every country is very important. There's still a lot of work to be done.